Sorry about that to anybody who joined me earlier. I was having some technical difficulties, but it looks like we got all those solved. And I don't know. I don't know what happened. I'm not a computer whiz, but something was going on with my computer. Got it fixed. Everybody should be able to hear me now. So let's just start over from the beginning. We got a lot of things to talk about, so we'll just jump right into it. We will start with the hiring of Mike Kafka. Absolutely a huge hire for the Lions, considering that this was somebody that not only was getting looks from other teams, like the Eagles were looking at him, the Giants interviewed him for a head coaching job. He got looks last year as well. This is a guy the Lions interviewed to be their OC. They wound up going with somebody else, but still wound up hiring him, which is, I mean, just huge. So it's almost like the Lions are kind of forming a little bit of a, I don't want to say dream team, but like they're forming a unit. It's a unit that is going to be, that consists of a lot of different parts with influence from many different coaching staffs that I think is really important. When you look at this coaching staff, you see Dan Campbell, who is from the Sean Payton coaching tree. And with that, I think he brings a lot of things to the table. Like, for example, the Lions like to go with a two-headed monster on run game. And that's similar to what Sean Payton and the Saints did while he was there with Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, situations like that. And then the aggressive nature that Sean Payton also has, that totally rubbed off on Dan Campbell. It's so very apparent. If you watch the Broncos play, you'll see just so much of what you see in Dan Campbell. And then you've got Drew Petzing, who comes from that Norv Turner, Kevin Stefanski tree. Norv Turner really, I think, is the big one. This is one of the greatest offensive minds of all time. If you remember those Chargers teams from the early 2000s, they were putting up points like it was going out of style, except for when it came to the playoffs. they kind of struggled in that area. But the year that LaDainian Tomlinson set the all-time season touchdown record, that was under Norv Turner. And now that's Drew Petzing coming from that tree. So then you've got Mike Kafka, who is now just joining the Lions. This is from the Andy Reid tree. And I don't really even need to explain Andy Reid's resume. The Packers, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the guy's done it all. And I think one of the big things that you get from Kafka is that he is a guy who can make players better, and he's a guy who can develop players. And you saw that with none other than Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech was a good quarterback. I think everybody assumed that he was going to be good. But if you remember, the Chiefs took some time with him before they started him over Alex Smith, which I think really should be the way that most teams go. And Mike Kafka was the quarterback coach for Mahomes, the guy who got Mahomes ready to go. So I think that's a big deal. Now, there could be some other coaching changes that are coming, some more additions, some more subtractions. We don't really know what that's going to look like just yet. I think one name that comes to mind immediately who may not be with the Lions anymore, and this actually could help us figure out what this high-ranking position that Mike Kafka got, is David Shaw. Was the passing game coordinator for the Lions in 2025. I don't know if he's coming back. Maybe he is. Maybe he's coming back at a different, type of setup, whatever it might be. The reason I think that is because David Shaw is John Morton's best friend. And just because and look, I know the NFL is it's full of coaches with friends who they didn't hire or who they fired or didn't bring back, and that's a totally normal part of the business. But I always kind of looked at Shaw as maybe he was like a Morton hire. Like, hey, John, you got this offensive coordinator job. Is there anybody you want to bring on? Yeah, let's go get my guy David Shaw. And if the Lions were to keep Shaw, he would be great. I just don't know what he would do. Maybe he's like a senior offensive assistant, that sort of thing, which carries a lot of weight and can go a long way. I just think when I'm looking at what this high-ranking position for Mike Kafka could be, the only thing that really makes a ton of sense that I could really throw him into is passing game coordinator. So it's almost like the Lions find themselves in this kind of co-offensive coordinator situation, which let me just be frank. Like, that's not what the Lions are telling anyone they're doing. And that's, they're Drew Petzing is this team's offensive coordinator. He's going to call the plays going forward, not Dan Campbell, not anyone else. It's going to be Drew Petzing. But I think there's a situation where maybe you could see Petzing kind of handling the run game side of things, and then you have, Mike Kafka taking care of the pass game side of things. And it's kind of like a dual coordinator type situation. When you have a bunch of guys like that, you got to utilize them to the best of their abilities. So we'll see where that goes. I'm just kind of blown away by how this team handled the offseason, man. Like, it's really, they've done really well. And I know I've mentioned this before. I know I'm the guy who apparently never says anything bad about the Lions, which just could not be farther from the truth. But I think that the Lions, man, the way that they handled this offseason, they did it all right. And they went and got the right coordinator for what it was that they wanted to do, which was get back to the run game, have new run concepts, change the way that they basically control their offense, which is, like Dan Campbell said, everything. When asked about how important it was to get the run game back going, he said it was everything. It's everything. So in that regard, Petzing is the perfect hire for that situation. And then when you add Kafka to that situation as well, and then you got Tashard Choice, who's a great running backs coach, and then maybe Scotty Montgomery is back. We don't know yet. I should real quick knock that out. I've seen a lot of Lions fans ask me if maybe Mike Kafka is the new assistant head coach. Look, at this point, I don't know if Scotty's even had the interview with the Ravens yet. So yesterday, the news, when that came out, it was that they were requested to interview him for their offensive coordinator job. They haven't given him that job. As far as I know, they haven't even talked to him yet. So at this point, Scotty Montgomery is still on this Lions coaching staff. He's still the assistant head coach. He's still going to be the receivers coach. I don't see that going away. But so you got them. You got Mark Brunell, who's another great quarterback coach, has done so much for Jared Goff's career. And then there's some little guys that you don't even think about. Marcus Tuiasosopo is, he's going to be coaching quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl. He's there right now in Mobile, Alabama, coaching quarterbacks. I think that there's a potential that we see more of him as we kind of move along into the years. And then there's Bruce Kwiatkowski, who was an offensive coordinator for the St. Louis Battlehawks in the UFL. He's got some potential to grow with the team as well and do some other things. And then Steve Oliver and Seth Ryan, two assistant tight end coach, assistant receiver coach, which is what Seth Ryan does. And then Steve Oliver is the assistant offensive line coach. Those guys had a big hand in creating a lot of the specials and the trick plays, that sort of thing, helping install those plays that Ben Johnson came up with. They helped him come up with those things and install them. So this is a really bright offensive coaching situation that the Lions have right now. I don't think anybody should feel bad about it for any reason. I know that the whole Drew Petzing thing scares people because, let's be frank, you didn't know his name, and that scares you a little bit. And like, you fear the unknown. That's just a normal thing. It happens. But I really think that they did such a great job putting this staff together, and you should feel pretty confident about it, in my opinion. Speaking of this staff, there is a position open still that we know of. There may be other things coming down the pike. Who knows? But there's a position that we definitely know is open. Then it's tight ends coach. Tyler Roll left the Lions to go take the offensive coordinator job at Iowa State, which is, good for him. That's what he wanted to do. That opens this tight end coach position. You know who has helped coach tight ends before in Detroit? Who is this? Who is Ben Johnson's assistant tight ends coach? Tanner Engstrand, the guy who the New York Jets just fired, their offensive coordinator. It did not work out in New York. And, it was really interesting with him in Detroit, just real quick. For a while, at least a year or two, it seemed like Tanner Engstrand was going to be the Lions' next offensive coordinator. I don't really know anybody who didn't feel that. It just felt like that's what was going to happen. And then when it came time to do it, when Ben Johnson got the job with Chicago, like it just you just felt it. I've never felt it before like this, but you just felt it cool down like immediately, like it wasn't going to happen anymore. And I just never seen anything like that. And I don't know that. Yeah, I'm not saying Engstrand is a bad coach. I think he goes to New York, and it's a situation where they just don't have it figured out at the most important position, and that just makes a huge difference. And I think that if you give Engstrand, who has experience with Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Jim Harbaugh rather, if you give him another shot, I think that this is a guy who could certainly be an OC again. I don't think that this was Tanner Engstrand's only chance. So I kind of look at it like, if I'm the Lions, here's a guy who's familiar with our tight ends, a guy who knows exactly what we want to do with our tight ends, and a guy who, I mean, just he's young still. Like I said, he could still be an OC again. I would call him. I would call Engstrand, and I would welcome him back to Detroit. I think that's probably the best thing that this team can do, just to add another offensive mind to the pool. I just really think that, man. I can't say it enough. They just built this offensive coaching staff really well. All right, I got some questions here. One from TikTok. What do I think about Mike McCarthy? I mean, I don't like it. I have friends who are Steelers coaches or Steelers friend. Gosh. All right. Let me say this over again. I have friends who are Steelers fans, and they don't like it either. I just think it was kind of like, it was like the most unimaginary hire that the Steelers could have made. I really think that somebody like Brian Flores or Jesse Minter, or I just think they could have went such a different way. Maybe if they could have went with like an offensive coach. I know they love, which I guess Mike McCarthy is, but like I feel like they could have went a different way, a younger way, like they did with Mike Tomlin, and that really worked out. Instead, they're going with one of the older guys, which it is what it is. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. I wouldn't have done it personally. That's my thoughts on it. Let's see. We got a question from YouTube. We're talking about, let's get it up on screen here. We're talking about offense a lot, but will Shepard get some kind of assistance, which I think he needs? That's not a bad idea. I kind of, I think about the early days of Aaron Glenn when the Lions brought in John Fox as a senior defensive assistant, and they had another guy who was with the Packers for the longest time. I can't remember his name, but he was an older coach who had been around for a long time. He was also a senior defensive assistant, and their jobs essentially were to help the defensive coordinator grow into the role a little bit while doing it on the job. So I don't think that's a bad idea if the Lions went out and hired somebody like that, got like maybe an older defensive coach who has been around the block and knows what he's doing. But other than that, nobody's going to like when I say this, but I think that defensive coaching staff is pretty well set. I don't think that the Lions really need to make much changes. They just need to get healthy, and they need a couple of changes that are on the field. I think Kelvin Shepard is more than ready for the job. I think he's proved that he was more than ready for the job. We've seen what he's able to do, even with such a low amount of talent. You look at that game against Tampa Bay, man, that was huge. To go in that game without any of your secondary and beat that team, that was huge. You go to Dallas, it's the same thing. It's a similar, that offense coming into that game, everybody will maybe forget about it now, but going into that game, everybody was talking about how good the Cowboys offense was and how they were going to light up the Lions defense. And that didn't happen. Week 18 against the Bears, I think that was the lowest amount of points the Bears scored all season. It's just, I think Shepard is a very good coach. I think Sean Dion Hamilton is a great coach, the Lions linebacker coach. I think he's going to be a DC someday. Jim O'Neill, who coached the Lions safeties, has done a great job with Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. He got defensive coordinator interviews this offseason. I like Deshea Townsend. He's a good cornerback coach. Again, they just need health. They need Terry and Arnold to play a whole season. They need Ennis Rakestraw to come out and play a whole season, play the whole time. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, they need these guys back, and it's just what this team needs. I think when that happens, you'll see a much better defense, sort of like what you saw during the beginning of the season when the Lions were one of the best defenses in the league. People don't want to believe it, but they were top 5 DVOA. They were leading the league in sacks and pressures. They were doing so well, and then everybody just started getting hurt, and it just went all down the tubes. So no, I don't think the Lions' defense is as big of a problem as maybe it seems. I really think the offense was more of the problem this year, and it was because of those little things like the goal-to-go situations where they struggled. They were 16th in the league in goal-to-go situations, and that's why you hire Drew Petzing, who had that really bad Cardinals team as 3rd in goal-to-go, and then you've got 3rd down conversions where the Lions went from 4th down to like 22nd. It was really bad. Another thing that Petzing was actually really good at in Arizona was able to change those 3rd down conversions. So, that just makes such a big difference. I actually want to get some actual numbers on that real quick because I wrote those down the other day. So on 3rd down, the Lions were 4th in the league in 2024. They were converting on 46.9% of their 3rd down conversions. They went down to 19th, so it wasn't as low as I initially said. They went down to 19th in 2025 and only converted on 38.7% of their 3rd downs. And then I mentioned the Cardinals. They were 9th with Petzing, 9th in the league, better than the Lions at converting on 3rd down. So I just those little things and the 3rd quarter problems where the Lions just, for whatever reason, I think if you want me to say something bad about the Lions, the 3rd quarter is where Dan Campbell really failed the Lions this year. And it's mostly because he had an agenda going into that quarter and he refused to get off of it. And he's publicly said what that agenda was. He wanted to come out of half and he wanted to run the ball. And that didn't always work. And when it didn't work, he didn't really move off of it. And you look to the Rams game and you look to the Steelers game and the Vikings game, same thing. Trying to run the ball in the 3rd quarter, it doesn't work. The opposing offense gets the ball back. They hold on to it for forever. They go down, they score. It's a problem. So I think that those are the main things that you want to fix because it changes the way the Lions play the game. It prolongs the time that they're on the field and keeps the defense off the field. It's huge. It's huge. What do we got here? I was just going to ask what Dan did as experienced vet coach to help out with the defense. That's a question that I'm going to have to ask him someday. He mostly kind of just gave it to Kelvin Shepard and said, "Hey, man, I trust you." That's kind of how it went. Within the parameters of whatever Dan Campbell's defensive philosophy is, which we know is to be violent and to get turnovers. And that's actually another thing. If you want the Lions defense to fix one thing, and this is where I bring up the Chicago Bears defense. The Bears defense was really bad this year, like really bad. Nobody saw that because they led the league in turnovers. I think if the Bears go out and have a similar season that the Lions defense just had this year, they'll miss the playoffs. Like that's how big it is. That's how bad the Bears defense was. Bears fans will never fess up to that. They never will. But they were like, they were bad. They were bad. Hold on. Let's look up just how bad they were. We're going to look it up. Okay, so the Bears were 10th in points against and allowed the 4th most yards, the 4th most total yards in the league. But you don't notice that because they got a bunch of interceptions and forced some fumbles. And because of that, it looks better. So that's essentially what Dan Campbell wants the Lions defense to be so badly, is to be the good defense that it can be at times, but then get those turnovers that'll mask some of the deficiencies that it might have. And I don't think that the Lions need to go into next season and have the number one offense and the number one defense. That would be freaking incredible, but it doesn't really happen. It's not really a thing. Rex Ryan as a potential senior defensive assistant. I don't think that Rex would do that. He might. I mean, his son's on the coaching staff, as I mentioned earlier. It's possible if he wants to come back and coach with his son. But I think Rex is living the life in the TV booth right now. It's you go to work, you go home at the end of the day, and you don't have a whole lot of stress. So, not that he would have a ton as a defensive assistant, but that's one to keep an eye on, I guess. Oh, okay. Let's see. Dan Campbell, is the issue with the Lions cost them many games going for it? Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a problem. Maybe it's just me, but I don't see going for it as the problem. What I do see as the problem is when you go to Week 18 against the Chicago Bears, and you're in a 4th and 1 situation. I'm all for the Lions going for it there. All for it, 100%. And all they really need to do is run David Montgomery up the middle, run Jahmyr Gibbs up the middle. You could have even had Jared Goff do the thing where he goes to the side and lays down. Like, that converts on first down a lot. You could do your own version of the tush push. But what you should not do in that moment with the game on the line is direct snap it to David Montgomery and ask him to pass it. That if you really like, that's where Dan Campbell's aggression can hurt you. It's not going for it on 4th down. When it's everybody looks back at that 49ers loss in the NFC Championship game. The Lions going for it on 4th down, like, it works. It works 2 times. If Reynolds just catches the ball, if Josh Reynolds just catches the ball, at least one of those times, it's a major change to the game. I don't fault him at all for going for it. It was the identity that they've come into the game with. It's the thing that's got them as far as they've gotten. I hope he does it a lot more. I really think he should do it. But and I mentioned this in an article earlier this week. You can't be too cute about it, and this is where Petzing can come in and maybe take Dan's hand off the button a little bit and be like, hey, I understand why Dan wanted to run that play with David Montgomery in Chicago. If you paid attention to the game, there was a thread that was going throughout. This is what my thread is. This is what a thread is for me. There was a thread going throughout the game where they kept going back to that. And this is something that Dan Campbell likes to do. And maybe if I watched other coaches, I would probably notice they do it too. If you go back to Dallas in 2023, they kept having Dan Skipper come out a bunch of times as an eligible passer, a bunch of times. But they didn't do anything with it until the end of the game when they threw the touchdown pass to Taylor Decker, and the official totally screwed the whole thing up. But the idea is we're going to keep doing something. We're going to prepare the defense's mind to wonder if something maybe might happen there, but we're never going to actually do it. Like David Montgomery kept getting the ball directly snapped to him, and you kept wondering, well, I've seen them pass it before. We've seen them do this play, but they didn't do it. They just kept running it. And then finally, when it came time to pass it, the Bears just read it at the right time, man. But so I understand why Dan Campbell did that. But with Petzing, you hope that stuff like that gets cut down a little bit. Like not the threading of plays. I think that's a great idea, but it's 4th and 1. All you got to do is get 1 yard and you win the game. Let's just forget the thread. Let's just throw it out. We don't have to do it just because it's there. There's little stuff like that. I think it's going to make a big difference. So we'll see where that goes. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about some draft stuff. the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Dream Bowl, Hula Bowl, American Bowl, College Gridiron Showcase, all those things were going on this last week. And this week, Senior Bowl is the really big one this week. So a lot of guys to watch down there for sure. Let me just throw a couple names at you here. Some guys that I am definitely keeping my eye on at the Senior Bowl. And here we go. Let's see. We got first up, there's Romello Height, edge rusher, Texas Tech. This guy, 62 pressures, 10 sacks last year. David Bailey is the guy that everybody wants. And because everybody wants him, he's probably not making it to 17. If he does make it to 17, then Brad Holmes needs to literally sprint to the podium. He needs to get up out of his chair. Hold on, let me plug in my phone here and sprint to the podium. I mean, if David Bailey was at 17 and Brad Holmes didn't draft him, you should never forgive him for it. But I don't think he's going to be. But Romello Height, his teammate, great player. I think he'll definitely be there at 17. You got to look at him. Katron Allen, running back, Penn State. I don't know what's going to happen with David Montgomery at this point, but if the Lions do trade him, Katron Allen, his comp is David Montgomery. I mean, this guy, he plays just like him. It's unbelievable. He runs like him. He blocks like him. He actually blocks a little bit better. And I think he may be a little bit better in the pass game too, but there's just so much similarities, and he's a lot younger too, which is nice. Jake Slaughter, center, Florida. Another guy is in this. This is really going to depend. I think if the Lions aren't able to find their center in free agency, and they go to the draft, and they're maybe thinking that they don't want to slide Ratledge over to that spot, I think Jake Slaughter is the best center in the draft with Connor Lew, who from Auburn's Connor Lew. He's going to be in the draft, I'm sure, but he's got a torn ACL, and it just feels like a risk to draft him. He's the best center in the draft, but he's not going to play this rookie year. So I like Jake Slaughter in that position. And then some other guys, Zion Young, edge rusher from Missouri, 56 pressures and 8 sacks this year. I know the Lions have had scouts out at Missouri multiple times this season to watch him and some of the other guys that are on that team. I like Kamari Ramsey a lot, a safety from USC. Really, if the Lions don't have Brian Branch or Kirby Joseph to start the season, which I don't really think that's going to happen. I think they'll at least have Kirby Joseph back for the start of the season, and then we'll see on Brian Branch. I mean, I'm sure he'll play in 2026. I just don't know when, and that's really based on what surgery he had and how bad the injury was. But if they don't get those guys back, Kamari Ramsey is a safety I really like, guy you can get in the second round. Just a couple other guys. LT Overton from Alabama, edge rusher. Another guy, Brad Holmes personally went out to Alabama this season. We know how he feels about Alabama. Jennings Dunker, a tackle from Iowa, is a guy I think is going to grow and kind of rise up the board a little bit. And then at the Shrine Bowl, there was some guys that I think were interesting. One of them was Caden Proctor. Caden didn't play at the Shrine Bowl, but he was there. And the Lions took him to the side. They had a conversation with him, and it's kind of an informal meeting a little bit. That's a left tackle that the Lions could certainly take at 17. That would be a huge one. So I don't know if they would, but I think there's a lot to like about him athletically and what he's able to bring to the table. Ooh. Did you guys hear that? My voice made like a weird noise, and I kind of sounded like Everybody Loves Raymond there for a second. Ray Romano. I sounded like Ray Romano there for a second. I don't know. It was weird. A guy that really interests me, and this was at the Shrine Bowl, and I made a video about this earlier. If you haven't watched it yet, I'll talk about it right now. Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King. This guy, it's interesting because I think the Lions could do a Taysom Hill thing with him. He can throw the ball. He's got an arm on him. He's a little bit older, and you know that concerns you a little bit, but he's got an arm on him. He can throw the ball. But the big thing is he can run the ball. He ran for over 900 yards this year, 15 touchdowns on the ground. I think you go back to that direct snap to David Montgomery thing that we were talking about. Now imagine you have a real quarterback out there doing that. Imagine you have Haynes King out there for a couple of plays a game where he takes a direct snap. Maybe he throws it. Maybe he runs it. He could do either one. And that just gives the Lions another element, another weapon that they haven't used before. So I really like the idea of doing that. I don't know if Detroit likes it, but the thing is, where did Dan Campbell come from? New Orleans. And that's where Taysom Hill was, and that's where Dan was the assistant head coach and tight end coach. What position does Taysom Hill have play in a hybrid role? Tight end. So I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility. And the thing is, this guy is going to be like 7th round pick, maybe undrafted. So it's not like you're investing a ton of draft assets into him where you're not taking him big. This guy, he's not going to be your future starting quarterback, but he gives you an element of your offense that you just didn't have before. So let's see. We got another question here. Who is my favorite tight end picks, free agent wise? Isaiah Likely or David Njoku? Man, you know, I like Isaiah Likely a lot, but I think he's going to be the more expensive of the two. Even though he's kind of like a tight end too, but I think another team might look at him like he could be their number one tight end. I like Isaiah Likely. And then in terms of the draft, there's a few guys I've got my eye on. Dallin Bentley from Utah. Dude is an athlete. Like, I watch this guy, man. He's doing some stuff out there that like he can run down the field. He can run fast. I think he's got like a 9.99 RAS. Like, this guy is very athletic, can block, can catch the ball. And at this point, he's a guy who's rising up the board. I think maybe you get him in the 5th. At this point, he might find himself as like the 3rd best tight end in this draft. We'll see what happens. So I really like him. But yeah, that's what I've got on my mind right now. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode. Love talking to you guys as always. So much fun. We will be back next week post Senior Bowl, and I think we're going to have some fun. We're going to do a mock draft together next week. I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to get on here, and you guys tell me what you want me to do, and I'll tell you why I don't want to do that, or I'll tell you why I think you're right, and we'll go from there. So next week, we are doing a live mock draft post Senior Bowl, and we'll see where things go. Talk to you guys then.